A couple of days ago, I made a video saying, pack your bags, Canada is getting ready for war. And on this nice calm Sunday, I'm here to tell you, I hope your bags are packed because Canada is going to war. That's right. See, Canada supports Israel. Whether you do or don't, it's irrelevant in this discussion. Canada has been giving a lot of money, a lot of thumbs up to Israel. Israel's an allied nation for what they're doing to basically hunt out Hamas in Gaza and attack Hezbollah in Lebanon. There's been lots of stuff happening, right? Casualties on both sides. It's getting out of control. While they've been attacking, there's been instrumental damage to Lebanon, right? People have been affected, homes have been lost, massive craters in the ground. And so Canada's first act is we're going to send $10 million for humanitarian aid, but not just that. Also sexual aid, which is literally on the Canadian government website. I can't make that up. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Canada, that we're sending money for sexual aid to Lebanon. But Canada is sending troops officially to go and help. Now, yes, it is guised as it's guised under humanitarian aid. That's how it starts. But just like going to the gym to get a workout in, the hardest part is getting there. And once you're there, it's game time. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage everyone to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet already. It does really help grow the channel. We're en route to 410,000 subscribers, and that would mean a lot if we got there sooner than later. But before we get into this video, we need to talk about protecting yourself. And the best way I find of protecting myself online is with private internet access, who also happens to be today's sponsor. I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Private Internet Access. We've teamed up together and we're offering my audience 83% off for using code SUNSHINE, which can be found linked down below in the description or the pinned comment below. It's no surprise that we're living in a time of censorship, and Canada is unfortunately leading that race because of Justin Trudeau. Now, Justin Trudeau wants to make sure that you can't see the news. He wants to make sure that you can't see certain content on streaming platforms like Netflix, Hulu, Crave, and you shouldn't have Disney Plus because, of course, our finance minister said if you can't afford things, you should cancel Disney Plus. So the way around this is through a VPN such as Private Internet Access. Now, for those who don't know what a VPN is, it's a way to encrypt your data, basically putting a cloak over you so that you can freely browse the internet without feeling like your personal information is at risk or the government getting and selling your personal information. And the best way that I like to go about this, the best cloak that I like to put over myself is Private Internet Access, which again can be found linked down below in the description or the pinned comment below for 83% off. Thank you, Private Internet Access, for sponsoring this video. And just to kind of add on to that, I'm not saying that there's going to be a draft in Canada, but if there is, and if they do come knocking, it might be, in your best interest to have your IP address as somewhere else in another country, so that when they check your devices and your internet, they say, oh, well, they're not home. Anyways, let's just get into it. This is the impact of one of the bunkers, right? This is a crater that's happened. This is what Israel is doing to flush out all of the leaders of Hezbollah, which a lot of them have since died. They've been killed in action, right? Number 1, number 2, potentially number 3 as well. And in response to all this, you have some breaking news, right? Possible invasion of Lebanon, soon multiple sources. Reports indicate Israeli tanks and ground troops are advancing towards the Lebanese border. Sources close to the IDF suggest the operation could start tonight, aiming to secure territory up to the Litani River, about 18 miles from the Israeli border, to establish a buffer zone for Israelis to safely return to their northern homes. And then here you get into Canada's response, right? So Canada has announced $10 million for humanitarian assistance in Lebanon. Now, on the surface level, oh, okay, sure, $10 million for humanitarian aid. Canada has been considered a peaceful country, a peacekeeping country. But remember at the start of the video a few minutes ago, I said, and they're also sending the $10 million for sexual health care. Well, that's right here. So you see, International Development Minister Ahmed Hussein announced the fund Saturday in a news release, which says the money will help provide things like food, water, and emergency health care, including sexual and reproductive health care. Now, I thought there's no way. This is a CTV report. So I went over to the Government of Canada's website. I'll even refresh the page, right? Let's take a quick look-see-poo here. Canada is deeply concerned by the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, a terrorist organization in Lebanon, which has caused a rapid increase in humanitarian needs. More than 90,000 people have been displaced within Lebanon since early September. Today, the Honorable Ahmed Hussein is sending $10 million in funding for humanitarian assistance to address the urgent needs of civilians in Lebanon. This funding will help provide food, water, emergency health care, including sexual and reproductive health care, protection services, and other life-saving assistance. And this is the part that I think is going to have a lot of controversy within Canada is, what? Like, why? It's wartime. What do you mean sexual and sexual reproductive health care? It's bizarre. Hey, we're sorry that you've been displaced from your home. How do you identify? Like, you think that's really something that's going to be happening. There's going to be a standard protocol. Every single person, what's your gender? How do you identify? What are your pronouns? It's really, really bizarre. But hey, this is the Canada that we have. But, I mean, we can change it with voting. Next up, you have one of the head leaders here for Iran who got the community notes of a lifetime on X. He said the Palestinian resistance is the victor. Hezbollah is the victor. Now, the actual community note is the entire Hezbollah leadership, including Nasrallah, has been eliminated. That is insane for a community note. And it feels like you got this schoolyard talk that's happening on X, but by actual government officials. Kind of crazy. And then to add on, he also said in another post that the Zionist criminals need to know that they are far too weak to be able to inflict any significant damage on the solid infrastructure of Lebanon's Hezbollah. And I'm just going to go out and say that I feel like there's been significant damage on the infrastructure. But in response to the head of the 1 and 2 position of Hezbollah, you have Iranian dissidents are gathering in front of the Israeli embassy to celebrate the fact that the airstrike has killed the number 1 leader and then also the number 2 leader, which is, I mean, unusual, not something that was on my bingo card per se, but they've also been doing this in Canada. So Iranians hold a street party in Toronto and hand out cake in celebration of Israel eliminating the leader. Like, this is wild. And they've even got food. They're thanking Israel. It's bringing people together. Right? So you got some Jewish flags in the background, some Israeli flags, in the background. I mean, people are just extremely, extremely happy that that the leaders are being taken out, right? And then you see one of the top comments here: the Iranian people are not the enemies of the Israeli people. They are the oppressed victims of tyrannical theocracy. And so we're just seeing basically all of that get flushed out with all of these ongoing wars and airstrikes. But what you're seeing also from world leaders is that, is it too much, right? Is it breaking any humanitarian codes? Is it war crimes? Well, Pope Francis seems to think that it's inappropriate, it's disproportionate and immoral, and he wants all of the bombings to stop. Francis was asked en route home from Belgium about Israel's targeted killing on one of Hezbollah's founding members. Friday's strike in Beirut targeted an area greater than a city block and reduced several residential buildings to rubble. And at least 6 other deaths have been confirmed. Francis didn't mention Israel by name and said he was speaking in general terms, but he said that the defense must always be proportionate to the attack. When there is something disproportionate, there is a dominating tendency that goes beyond morality. A country that does these things, and I'm talking about any country, hinting at Israel, of course, in a superlative way. These are immoral actions. But when you don't do this, you see the bad blood of these things. And so I just kind of want to pass the question off to you. How do you feel about this? Are you satisfied with the response from Israel? Because I know there's a lot of controversy around this. Do you think it's too much? Do you think it's too little? Do you think it's right on cue? Let me know what you guys think. But now, of course, this is Canada. So what does Justin Trudeau have to say? Well, it took him an entire day to actually respond to what happened. But finally, he did eventually post. Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, has been killed. He was the leader of a terrorist organization that attacked and killed innocent civilians, causing immense suffering across the region. More must be done immediately to protect civilians. We urge calm and restraint during this critical time. Canada is working towards a diplomatic solution that allows people to return home safely to Israel and Lebanon. We want peace and stability in the region. And we reiterate our calls for an urgent ceasefire. We stand with Lebanese and Israeli people. They deserve to live in peace and security. And I mean, the calls for ceasefire, like, that's just not happening. No one is listening to that at all. And Trudeau may bark for that. And, you know, Canadian MPs may bark for that, but Joe Biden is kind of the one, or at least America, are the ones to decide on whether or not things like this are allowed in the world, and he gives a thumbs up. Joe Biden calls the Israeli strike killing Hezbollah's leader a measure of justice. So there you go. So in all, what is Canada's response going to be? Well, we saw not too long ago, right? A couple of days ago, I'd posted a radio, CBC radio blip that NATO is wanting Canada and allies to gear up for a conventional war. And you're seeing this rhetoric pick up more and more, right? Even an Alberta channel here on X said NATO is urging Canada to prepare for conventional war. Experts warn Canada could face a direct conflict with Russia or China if NATO is tested, and Canada is being asked to ensure it's ready if war breaks out. But before all of that happens, you had Macron, who just came to Canada. And he sat down with Justin Trudeau, and they went over how strong our partnerships are. Right? Nothing to do with bathtubs this time, right? And we know you mention a bathtub and Trudeau goes, wow, off the handles. And so here's a video of them having a very good and close time, an unusually close cross-legged time together from two closeted leaders of a country. But nonetheless, what is Canada's response going to be? Well, here you go. Canadian forces are struggling with training bottleneck, commander tells MPs. The Canadian military has just as much of a problem with training as it does with recruiting, a House of Commons committee was told on Thursday. In her first appearance before the Defense Committee, General Jenny Carignan, the newly appointed Chief of Defense Staff, testified that the armed forces only has the capacity to put 6,400 recruits through basic training per year. Now, to me, I feel like that is extremely low. I feel like if, you know, we're to listen to NATO and the calls for what's happening right now, that we're going to be going to war and we're already having troops deployed, which is what we're going to take a look at next, right? It's already happening. Right? It's not about when, it's already happening. 6,400 per year is not enough. It should be 6,400 per month at the very least, right? Of how many recruits you start up a new boot camp, you start up a new basic training every single month, right? It's wild. It's wild how bad we're set up to either fight a war, to defend ourselves, or to go and assist in an ongoing war. We are exploring ways of expanding our basic military qualifications as well as the rest of qualifications in terms of the various trades that we need to train people post basic military training, which would mean going to your actual trade, right? Basic training is very broad stroke learning. You learn how to fire a couple different weapons. You learn how to throw a grenade. You learn the basics of launching an RPG, right? And then you go to your specific trade and you learn how to do things that are more niche specific to where you're going to be posted. And it just feels like we are set up for failure. And I'd love to know your comments on this, because I feel like with how they're talking, they're going to start, instead of trying to bring in more people and try to find different ways to teach people the information and actually let it sink in, they're going to lower the standard. So what once was, people would come out of basic training pretty qualified, pretty technical, right? But still basic. I think now it's going to be diluted even more to people that barely even understand the basic fundamentals of, weapon safety and holding a weapon properly. And that is extremely dangerous, because if and when, well, not if, but when we are put in this position of we're actually going, like people are going, and they are right now, but once these new recruits are put in that position, it's going to be really embarrassing and also not effective, right? But again, I'd love to know your thoughts down on that. And then we have to talk about the fact that Canada is already deploying people to Lebanon for this humanitarian aid adventure excursion, right? Let's take a look.
World leaders gathered at the United Nations in New York this past week, where the world's conflicts were at the top of the agenda. For more on this, let's bring in Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, Bob Ray. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Roger. Good to be with you this morning.
Let's talk about the escalating war, I guess we could call it, between Hezbollah and Israel. Do you have hope now for any kind of a diplomatic solution to this?
Well, I mean, I think it's obviously the events of the last couple of days have been very dramatic. And I think it's going to take a while for us to figure out what the next response is going to be from both sides. I do think that Israel has inflicted the damage on Hezbollah that they felt needed to be done. There doesn't seem to be much sign of letting up, but at some point it's going to have to come to a conclusion. I hope we can get to a ceasefire quickly. It's always important to remember that it's not just a conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. It's a war that inflicts huge damage and suffering on thousands of civilians on both sides. You have tens of thousands of people who've had to leave their homes, who are displaced. You've had many hundreds of people killed on both sides.
Could we be considering more sanctions possibly against Israel?
Oh, I don't think that's. I personally don't think that's the answer at the moment. I do think it's really about trying to figure out how to ensure that both sides can increase the sense of security of themselves, and particularly of their populations. As I said before, you've got a lot of displaced people who feel tremendous insecurity at the moment and tremendous suffering, and that's what we need to bring to an end as quickly as possible. I think you can't really separate out the Hezbollah conflict from the Hamas conflict. Hezbollah got involved because of their alliance with Hamas and with Iran. I mean, Iran is using these countries as their proxies, these groups as their proxies, and that's something that's creating a huge amount of insecurity in the region.
Now, Canada is sending military personnel. What can we hope to accomplish with that? And are any concerns about dangers they may face?
And so what we're doing right now, if I'm not mistaken, by sending troops for humanitarian, like not only money, but also troops, this is getting back to the roots of how Canada's military has functioned, right? Peacekeepers, humanitarian aid. Yes, they go in armed, but they're there to help people that have been displaced from their homes, water, food, shelter, cots, right? Help them out. And that's kind of, I understand Canada, 100 years ago has had a very badass, front lines military exposure, but just historically over the past 50 years or so, that's been kind of the overarching stroke of our military, at least the goals. That's been the goal. And this is where it becomes kind of wishy-washy, because if something were to actually happen to any one of our soldiers, we are ipso de facto at war. We're no longer humanitarian aids, and it doesn't give permission, obviously, to just start shooting up people. Obviously not, but if something bad were to happen, either through an airstrike, an accident, or something along those lines, this is where we're putting ourselves in that risk of. I know they're not, they're not going to be. Israel is going to know where, and all the bomb flyings or the people shooting the bombs and the missiles are going to know where the humanitarian aid is. But no, I don't think any other country is really rushing to that, right? Canada has really taken the reins on this, and I don't know, I think there's a lot of mixed reactions about this, but of course, let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this. Do you think it's good for Canada to go and provide troops and money for humanitarian aid, or do you think that we should, stay out of it a little bit more?
Well, it's a dangerous situation, but we're trying to provide more security to Canadians and trying to make sure that we're able to do what we can from our mission in Beirut, and to make sure that people are safe at work. We have a lot of people living in Lebanon who have Canadian passports, Canadian citizens, but I think the government would only be sending troops there or a military contingent there if we thought it would be necessary for the security of Canadians who are living there and working in the country.
Would we be able to get them out, though, the Canadians that are in Lebanon? There's, I believe, 45,000 is one of the numbers I believe has been mentioned. How can we get them out? And the government has been asking them to leave, and many are still there. How do we get them out if this gets even worse?
Well, we have been saying to Canadians who feel they are insecure that they should take the steps necessary in order to get to an airport that is flying and allowing flights out. The situation changes from hour to hour. We obviously are going to be doing whatever we can to provide the assistance that we can to people who have decided to stay on throughout this very difficult conflict. And the government will be looking at whatever other measures it can take in order to deal with the situation. But there are no kind of flip answers to this. The best answer to everything is for the fighting to stop, and for a ceasefire to be maintained over a long enough period that we're able to get the kind of humanitarian help in, that we can help the people who are displaced, and help the people who want to come back to Canada, who want to come back. But that, I think, is the course of action that makes the most sense. Whether that is the course of action that both countries decide to follow, we're just going to have to see. Okay,
Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us today.
Canada is, in fact, being deployed to go and help with humanitarian aid. At least that's the storefront reasoning as to us going there. As to our involvement with combat in the situation, it's still unknown. But again, time will tell, and this next week is going to be insane. I'm sure that you're going to have some MPs talking about it in Parliament. But as we approach the end of the video, I'd love to pass the question off to you. How do you feel about this? Is Canada's involvement good? Is it bad? Let me know why. Are we doing enough? Are we not doing enough? Let me know your guys' reasoning down below in the comments. This is the end of the video. Enjoy the rest of your weekend on your way out. If you haven't yet already, I'd like to encourage you guys to smash the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.